There we go. Check my view here. All right, welcome everybody. So this is the January 2022 meeting of the Nevada County Camera Club, and I'm Rachel Rosenthal, the president for this year, and glad to see so many folks here tonight. So we're going to change the order a little bit. I've got some announcements to make, but what I'm going to do first is turn it over to our new incoming membership chair, Barbara Summers, so she can welcome some of our new folks. So Barbara, I turn it to you.
Okay. Hi, everybody. Well, I am Barbara. That thing about this is not my first rodeo. Yes, it is. Yeah, and here we go. So I am the new membership chair, and I'm replacing or taking Mark Triella's place. And behind the scenes, I have big shoes to fill, so it'll be a little while. At any rate, so the yearly awards this last weekend, you guys, what a powerhouse club this is. Amazing, beautiful images. For me, it was a real struggle to choose between any of them. They were just wonderful. We are a club of a lot of resources, and I want to kind of reach out to people who are new and working on their skills and so forth with photography, to reach out to those people around you in the club. We have an amazing resource base here. I guess the other thing I wanted to mention was it is gentle reminder, it's time for our dues, guys. We'd like to see those come in, by mid-February or so. We'll be sending out a little notice to help remind people. The address has changed. So if you're not current on that, go to our website, the nccamera.club.com, and all the information is there. The new address is 1575 P.O. Box, 1575 Grass Valley. The site is set up. Our webmaster did a good job of setting us up so that you can pay with a check or you can pay by PayPal. So, whatever works best for you.
What's the amount?
I want to encourage you because we don't want to miss out on any activities. This club has lots going on, and you don't want to forget to get your membership in.
What's the amount?
It is $35 for individuals and $45 for a family.
And if you do PayPal, it's $2 extra.
That's right. Thank you, David. Yeah.
Am I
Okay.
correct that if we joined after September last year, it covered this year?
It didn't.
Yeah, that's correct. It does.
Oh, it does, Mike?
Yeah, it does. If you paid the full amount after September 1st
Yeah,
to the end of the year, it covers the
Oh.
2020.
okay.
Thanks,
Thank you.
Mike.
Oh, we did something different, but okay.
So anyway, so let's go to introducing our guests. We have our new members. We have 3 new members that haven't been introduced yet. The first one is Lenny. Is Lenny here? Lenny does have a last name, but I did not want to destroy it. And if Lenny was here, I'd give this person a chance to respond. Okay.
I don't see him on the list, Barbara, but
Yeah. How about Brad Oliver?
I don't show a Brad either.
Somewhere? No? How about Frank Gould? Okay, we're
Don't see him either.
missing our new members right now. Okay, well, that's all that we have for our new members. We have guests, several, and we want to say hello. I hope you enjoy the program this evening. It's going to be wonderful. I've been on a workshop with Josh. It was the first one I ever went on. We went to Lake Tahoe, not to be missed. It's a great workshop. So with that, I will give it back to you, Rachel.
Okay, thank you, Barbara. Thank you very much. And welcome to all the guests and new members. Hopefully they'll show up tonight. All right, so as you noted, I am recording, and the idea tonight is that Kathy and I are going to be watching for distractions in the background. So just so you know, if there is background noise, you might be muted, but you can always weigh in by pushing your space bar if you have something you'd like to say. And after the meeting is done tonight, what will happen over the next few days is I will upload it to the club's website. So it'll be log on down the right-hand side under meeting videos, and you'll be able to find tonight's presentation. And I'm guessing more than a few people will want to go back and watch Josh's presentation. No pressure, Josh, but I bet this will be watched after the fact tonight. All right, a couple of comments. We were supposed to be in person tonight. We had really hoping to do that, but given the surge of Omicron, the board elected it was just not yet safe to do so. So just know that we are monitoring it at every board meeting. We will keep you apprised of when we believe it is safe to return in person, and I hope beyond hope that it will be sometime soon. And a super welcome. The club changed the board this year, and this is our first meeting of the year. So I want to say a special welcome to our new board members of Fred Finney's, our incoming treasurer, Laura Greenman is our incoming secretary, and Barbara Summers, who came in as membership chair. And then I'm continuing in the second year as president, and Kathy is continuing as vice president. So welcome to everybody. All right, a couple of quick announcements on activities of the club. We've got photography month in the month of April that you've heard us speak about for several months now. We've got 3 events as a club, and we've got the Granucci exhibition at the Center for the Arts in Grass Valley. We have the on-camera challenge at Courtyard Suites, and then we have photo walks. So the Granucci Gallery, the committee met and we have 40 entries into that exhibit. It was just yesterday we made that selection. And so if you submitted, you should have gotten an email indicating which of your images was selected for the Granucci and the timelines for that show. Got some really fabulous work. I mean, it was a tough choice in many, many cases. So I'm really looking forward to seeing a really fantastic show. So with that, I'm going to turn it to Dave. McClellan's going to talk about the on-camera challenge. So Dave, to you.
All right. Hi, everybody. For several years now, and we've moved it from the hot summer to the cold winter. So we'll see if that changes things a little bit for us all. The Gold Country on Camera is a photographic challenge for Nevada County Camera Club members. And you should have received an email invitation. I think I sent it out Rachel sent it out for me on Wednesday, and it has all the details. If you can't find it, let me know, and I can send you another copy or let one of the board members know. How the challenge works is that a map of Grass Valley in Nevada City will be sectioned into grids, and participants will have a grid area drawn with a random wheel of grids. And after that, you'll have a week to shoot images of any style and any subject within your grid, and a month to process your image for display after that. And we're trying some new ideas for 2022, and one of them is to have the Photo Challenge Gallery show coincide with the regional event celebrating April 22 as Photography Month that Rachel was just mentioning. And this time we'll be showing the gallery exhibit at the Grass Valley Courtyard Suites. We will no longer be at the frame shop in Nevada City. And a benefit of the season change is hopefully you won't have to deal with the heat and smoke, so that will be helpful. Another change is that a new grid map will be designed, and there will only be as many grids as there are participants. So the grid areas may be quite a bit larger. So hopefully that will help as well. And you can enter to participate on the Wix site shown in the email invitation. And if you've done the challenge before, we hope you want to return and have some more adventure. And if you haven't, please consider participating. It's a great way to try new creative techniques and ideas and see your art shown in a gallery setting. So hope you'll sign up. Thanks.
Okay. All right. Well said, Dave. So Kathy, did you want to talk a minute about the photo walks?
Yes, I do. And just to tag on to what Dave said, not only can you find the URL for the photo challenge on the email we send out, but if you go to our website and click on 2022 Photography Month, it'll take you to another page that has all the information plus a hot link to go to our website to sign up. So I encourage you to do that this year. Lots of fun. So want to just talk briefly about the photo walks. We're going to have 4 photo walks in April for Photography Month. There's going to be 2 in Grass Valley and 2 in Nevada City, 1 each week. And they're going to alternate between daytime walks and night photography. And we have some people who do night photography that are going to help us in the evening. But what specifically I'm looking for are people from the club to assist as leaders and to help us with all of our members who join us, or all the guests who join us on the photo walks. So if you are so inclined, send me an email. I'll send you, the dates are actually on the website. If you click on 2022 Photo Month, the dates of the walks are on there. But I'd really love some extra help. So please email me and say, I'm in, I'm ready to do a walk. And you don't have to lead it by yourself. There's a group of us. So we just need more bodies and cameras. So thank you. Back to
And
you.
Kathy failed to mention was that these walks are open to the public.
Oh, yeah.
Good point.
Thank you, Anne. And Anne has been doing a great job, or will be doing an amazing job. Behind the scenes right now, she's doing it, but there's going to be a whole slew of advertising going out locally. And so we will probably get a number of members from the public, large, we hope, to come to the photo walks. So thanks to Anne for that one.
Yeah, not only, yes, on the photo walks, but also in terms of the Granucci exhibit and the on camera. Anne is behind the scenes getting ready to push out a lot of media. So we're hoping to have great attendance at all 3 events.
Yes.
So, and also we'll note, if I've sent this an email, but the Dave Arstein, our webmaster, added a new calendar feature to the club's website. So if you haven't checked that out, please do so. Log in, and at the top there's a little calendar icon. Click on that. And then we're putting dates, for example, dates of the photo walk, dates of the Granucci exhibit. And for our meetings, the Zoom links will be there too. So you don't have to search through your email trying to find where was that Zoom link. They'll be on that club calendar if you can't find them in your email. So please use that as a resource. And thanks to Dave Arstein for making that possible. All right, so let me ask then, any other announcements from the group? Anybody? Dave?
Let's see, Bill Wages is not here.
I saw him. He's here.
I'm right here.
Bill?
He
Oh,
appears.
okay. We need to talk about the field trip. Bill was trying to get, Bill, you can talk about, unfortunately, what we couldn't get with the Air Force Base.
Yeah, I was trying to get into, one of the members last year suggested Beale Air Force Base. They do private tours for groups. And I emailed them, and they're not having any right now because of the COVID. But I'll keep trying to reach out, and hopefully they'll open up later on this year. Also, I have an email out to Ananda. I hear they're opening the gardens this year. And I'm going to try to do another after hours club field trip there. So unfortunately, that's going to be the month of April, and I may be in Ireland with David during there, so we may need to get somebody to lead that one if I can get that to happen. So, but I'll keep working on that one as well. So.
Okay, thanks. All right, David, anything else you'd like to share?
Now we were going to work on some other nature ones, but we haven't developed anything yet.
Okay.
So maybe we'll probably put an announcement. If we will put an announcement in between meetings as that develops.
Okay. All right. Well, thank you. And I have one short announcement of my own, is that I'm teaching a class at Viewpoint down in Sacramento on travel photography. It's on Saturday, February 12th, 9:30 to noon. The plan at the moment, we're planning for both, as Josh mentioned, we're going to both Zoom and in person. So it's unclear. Right now it's posted as in person. So we'll see what happens as we get closer. But if you're interested in travel photography, please check that out. And with that,
And
Yes?
mention that I know, I'm assuming Josh will talk about it, but he and I are both, we have this topic, Josh is going to be talking about Costa Rica.
Yes.
And we have some openings still on our Costa Rica trip in July, which is looking to be a lot of fun. I've been hearing from people that have gone there, and it's very easy to get in. The only thing we have to do is the hardest part is coming back and having to have a negative COVID test coming back. But it looks like we have a really good trip coming up, and Josh will talk about that at the beginning of July.
Nice. Sounds great. All right. Okay, with that then, I will turn it over to Kathy to introduce our presenter tonight.
Okay, will do. Thank you, Rachel. Thank you,
Yeah.
everybody. Josh Miller is a local hometown guy. And at some point, Josh, we're going to have to find out how you moved from Washington down to Nevada County, but I won't talk about that right now because I want to talk about you in your professional life. Josh has worn many hats, including naturalist, outdoor guide, and environmental educator. His abilities as a naturalist and photographer are often called upon by nonprofit environmental organizations to promote public awareness for their causes. He teaches photographic workshops, and as Barbara said, she's been to the Lake Tahoe one, and I think he has another one coming up in Lake Tahoe, which Josh, you get to talk about, I think, as well as the Costa Rica trip that's coming up with David. His award-winning photographs are in many private collections, and they regularly appear in publications throughout the world, as he's a regular contributor to Outdoor Photographer magazine. And his clients include National Geographic, Sierra Club, Microsoft, Audubon. He teaches workshops internationally. And his website is joshmillerphotography.com. So he's going to talk about photographing Costa Rica, why he loves it, why he keeps going back. He's going to share some travel stories and entertain us. So Josh, thank you very much for joining us, and it's to you.
Thank you. I'm kind of laughing because it kind of is embarrassing to hear you read that. So, but yes, you want to know how I came to California to start things out? Was that I literally, the day I graduated college, I moved into the back of a minivan with no seats in it, and I lived in the back of the van for 2 years in California, guiding some trips, but really just trying to be a climbing bum until eventually like that led into other, guiding work and teaching and things like that. But mostly I came here unemployed to be a climber. So just what every parent wants their kid to do right when they graduate, right? So, obviously like this was originally put together and designed to be in person. And I know I've been in before, and I know a lot of people in the group, obviously. So it as many questions and people have along the way. I think someone was going to maybe watch the chat and kind of pose those questions. I won't look at it because I'm not that talented. But
I'm doing that for you, Josh. And you
perfect.
Want me to interrupt you?
Yeah.
Okay.
I mean, normally in person, like in a room, it's far more, I think, more of a discussion than me talking about whatever very important photographic topic, right? So I think the more you guys do that, the more fun this will be. Because I was looking through it again tonight, and I'm like, I don't want this just to seem like a big like travel brochure for Costa Rica. I want it to be way more about photography and stuff like that. So, questions. My intent was to do the presentation, and then I brought my stuff, my gear, which I would have, normally like set out on a table or something, and people could ask questions. So whatever questions that people have about that kind of stuff, we can do that at the end as well. So, and I think all told, we have about an hour, is my understanding, but I'll try to not talk that long. That way there's time for questions.
That's perfect.
The one good thing about Zoom, I realized, I hadn't thought about this before. I can do my presentation with no shoes on, and it's far more relaxed than, standing in front of people and having to, appear professional. So, so let me share my screen and we can start here.
This person is local to the area here.
So I've lived in Nevada County, Nevada City, like almost pushing 20 years. Well, and by live, that means the first couple of years was like sleeping under my wife's parents' pool table when we were like between jobs. So I don't think the first couple of years weren't really living here, but let me get this thing cranking. Oh, sorry. Try to get it so I can see some of you guys. I don't need to see the slides in depth in the same way. So then I at least have a little bit of a sense of if it's working. All right. Cool. All right. So it doesn't want to play. There we go. All right. So when we first started talking about me doing this slideshow, we talked about, well, why is it that I keep coming back, and why is it that so many people like to go to Costa Rica and photograph there, things like that. And so I kind of built this more, less about teaching of photography and more about talking about Costa Rica and what's cool about it, and why it's fun to go and photograph and why it's so productive. But we can talk along the way, with questions and things about, like, well, how do you get a photo like that? And, what's going on when you see the like hummingbird shots? Like, what's going on with all that stuff? So I'm good. My clicker is, there we go. All right, sweet. So, the first thing is, why is Costa Rica so great for photography? That I think is the underlying point or the thesis of this talk. And really, it's just, the reason for me is that, one, it's a cool environment that's totally different than where we live. Until going to Costa Rica, well, I guess that's not totally true. I went to Australia, to the rainforest, but the tropics is totally different than growing up in the Seattle area. So that's the first thing. But really, when we talk about Costa Rica, it's the wildlife is the big thing that I think most of us photographers, think about. There is other stuff besides wildlife, which we can kind of, talk about a little bit as well. But, the big thing is, the birds is really a big draw for a lot of photographers. People come down, especially in the winter, which we'll talk about in a second, for the birds, because there's so many birds that migrate through Central America. You'll see I got a map and a picture here in just a second. But, the big thing is the diversity of subject matter. So you've got birds, and they're really cool looking birds. Like, there's some wild looking stuff in Costa Rica. The quetzal, with that super long tail, which is probably like I think that's probably the bird that, is the ultimate bird that most people want to get to photograph. It's not an easy bird to get. Sometimes it's very dependent on finding a nest and things like that. Then you got these really cool reptiles, the frogs are just mind blowing, the poison dart frogs, things like that. And then there are some really cool mammals. You've got 4 species of monkey. And then there are landscapes as well as a photographer. And, really, I think a big piece of what makes Costa Rica work well as a photographer is that it's a very small country physically. And so, like this summer, David and I are doing a trip. Jen, my wife, and I are taking a group of high school students. Previous to that, we usually, traditionally, every couple of summers, we'll take a group of high school students, and then I'll usually stick around and teach a photo workshop also. And it works well because of that small space and the varied topography is, in say a 10-day or a 2-week or some version of that type of trip, if you were to go on your own or go with the group, you have the ability to go to a lot of different ecosystems with relatively short drives, or whether you're renting a car. When we go on one of our trips, it's like we've got the transportation handled and all that stuff. But, you're not having to drive, imagine driving from like Washington to California. It's like, I guess you can do it in a day, but it's a pretty long and painful drive. Whereas you can kind of circumnavigate the whole country of Costa Rica and have all these different ecosystems and different, species and things in a relatively reasonable manner. Higher elevation, cloud forests, tropical beaches, all of that. So we kind of mentioned the migration, resident birds. There's some birds that live in Costa Rica and Central America, year round, but especially in the winter, there are other birds coming down from North America or coming back up from South America, as they're migrating through. The other piece of Costa Rica, why I think we have gone back, we've taken there's a couple of pictures of our own kids. We've taken our kids several times to Costa Rica. It's just super easy logistics.
Josh,
Yeah.
are you showing us a different photo? Are you showing us pictures of your kids?
No, not yet.
Oh,
I was kind of going down this list. Yeah.
Ah, okay.
They'll be there in a sec. Yeah.
Okay.
So it's just super easy logistics, whether you go on your own or with a group. It's a safe, it's a safe country. They've got, actually, interestingly, we always use the example that they got rid of their military. I want to say it was in the 1950s. I don't remember, and spent the money on education. So, from a social standpoint, it's like a vastly different situation. They have a higher literacy rate than the United States. And, their healthcare system often works better sometimes than ours. So it's an interesting social experiment as well with Costa Rica. So that's kind of like the why behind, Costa Rica is so good. So my laser pointer won't work on the screen, and apparently my mouse won't show up either. So, but you can see in these pictures, you've got the Pacific Flyway on the left and the Central Flyway on the right. And you can see Costa Rica is down here. I can't point at it. Down here close to the bottom. If we were in a real room, I'd be able to point it out. But you can see all these birds are funneled. So as a result, that just leads to a lot of species in a small area. Incredible.
Josh, sorry to interrupt you. If you go up to the view options or the options on top of your share, you can actually, I think there's a pointer up there.
Yeah, I don't know why. Normally, I don't know.
Okay.
Whatever. I don't have many. Like, I can see where my mouse is moving, but I can't physically see it. And normally I can in Zoom. But
okay.
It's fine. I'll make it work. I don't have much that I need to. So this is an example of landscape stuff. And, as a landscape photographer, this place is called Rio Celeste. I'm looking for, with this, I made a special trip, not just to Costa Rica, but this was kind of out of the way of where we were. But I'd seen like a snapshot somewhere online, which I definitely look online for possible photo opportunities all the time, for landscapes especially. And so I'd seen photos of this. It's basically the water has this mineral from like near a volcano upstream is the basic gist of it. It's got a lot of mineral content. And so the river itself ends up having this like weird bluish green color unless it rains a lot. And then there's a lot of sediment and it becomes brown. So made a special trip to try to go to this place and photograph it. So that's like one of the cool landscape things. And then, yeah, if we're talking photo technique, we can go as far into that as people are interested, but yeah, it's shot on a tripod with a long shutter speed. I don't honestly remember the number, but I would say it's probably at least a second or more to get that blurred water effect. Nothing's working now. Now it's totally locked up.
Uh-oh.
Let's try this. All right, let's see if that works. Can you see?
No, you've lost your share. You got to reshare.
All right, yeah. That's funny. Zoom works great normally for me.
Yeah, it's only when people are in the club with us.
Exactly. It's because you guys are actually on camera, whereas like when I was dealing with the high school kids, they're all off camera. There's no audience, so it doesn't want to work so well. White-faced monkey or white-faced capuchin. So one of the things with photographing in Costa Rica, I think, as a photographer, is you really have to be ready all the time, which is tough because it's hot, right? It's humid. So you're not necessarily thrilled with like lugging around your big lens, your long lens to be able to photograph stuff. But you never know, like there's several of these pictures were taken like in a grocery store parking lot, stuff like this. This was from a boat, but at the same time, it's not that, I didn't need some huge, enormous lens. I had a decent sized one. But I really like taking pictures of the monkeys and things like that in action in the trees. And because it is the tropics, it's often overcast, which really helps with overcast light as well. So we've got, Costa Rica. One of the things, like I said, is there's just these amazingly colorful birds, right? So the scarlet macaw, in this case, it's easy to, well, I wouldn't say it's easy to find them, but we usually can find them almost every trip. It's harder to get an actual eye level view of them. There's some specific spots that you can go where you have a better chance. There's one spot where you can be up on a hill and there's some trees that they typically are, flying around amongst, and that's kind of one of these situations with this is, being able to be, and I think as a photographer, really thinking about like, how do you, I was just at Llano Seco Wildlife Refuge on Thursday morning for sunrise, testing out a new camera. And yeah, this immature red-tailed hawk landed right in the tree above us, but it's like you're shooting like straight up at the thing. And I basically didn't bother to even shoot it because I was like, I can't get at eye level, which changes the whole emotion or perspective. Instead of looking up and thinking birds are in the sky or above us, being at eye level, all of a sudden it makes the viewer almost feel like they are a bird. It changes the whole perspective on things. So yeah, the scarlet macaw. So we kind of talked about the easy logistics. So it's easy traveling from the States. There's actually 2 international airports in Costa Rica now. As of just a few years ago, they opened a second one farther north and closer to the coast. And so COVID has obviously thrown a monkey wrench into everything. Theoretically, we were supposed to be doing this trip last year, but traditionally, there's starting to be some airlines doing direct flights out of, I think for a little while, Alaska Airlines was even doing a direct flight out of Sacramento. Whereas when we take the high school students this summer, we're going to fly from San Francisco to, I want to say it's like Miami to back to Costa Rica. It's like this circuitous route, but that was the cheapest option. But if you're just going on your own and you're not buying 20 tickets, it's easy to get there. Customs is easy to deal with. The lodging is safe. The medical care is really good. So this is a typical lodge that we stay at. David and I will be staying at this place. David doesn't know this yet, but we'll be staying here when we go. And back here, you can't see on my mouse, on the right-hand side, you'll see there's like a little roofed area. That's where we often will photograph hummingbirds because they've got feeders there. So the hummingbirds are already coming in there. And the trick with hummingbirds is it's just not very productive to chase them around in the flowers. It's far more productive to, go to an area where, somebody puts out a hummingbird feeder every day. And so the hummingbirds are totally habituated to people and they come in close, and then you kind of set up in that location and wait for them to come to you, as opposed to same thing to some extent with butterflies, chasing them around often, then they just flush and fly away. So,
Hey, Josh,
yeah.
you said you and David are going to be staying there. Where are the rest of the folks from the tour going to be staying?
We've got these really nice cardboard boxes and tents, and we're going to put them in the grass here by the water. No, this is actually the restaurant, or I don't know, the dining room, I guess would be the correct thing. So I don't actually have a picture of the rooms. They're like kind of off camera. And from a photographic standpoint, aside from, where Anne's going to be staying, because she's going on the trip, by the grass or on the grass, this is again, that example of like the slow shutter speed. And if I'm shooting a building or a tent, like glowing at night, if you're trying to create those types of photos, one of the examples with this is that this is not daylight and it's not nighttime either. It's that like shoulder right as it's getting dusk. And basically like I set up in that spot, and then knowing that as it gets darker, the building will become brighter and brighter and brighter until at some point they'll kind of balance out, after sunset. And then as that keeps going, the ambient light keeps going down, but the building stays the same exposure, or the same luminosity. I don't know if that's quite the correct term, but it stays the same brightness. And as a result, eventually it will become too bright and you start to lose the detail of everything else. So it's not an HDR image. It's just being, timing it correctly, as far as, there's probably like a 5-minute window or something like that. In fact, Circle, I just saw this, just posted a photo that I shot years ago of 4 people walking across the sidewalk in Nevada, or the crosswalk in Nevada City. And the first person is the salmon, and they're doing the Beatles walk, where they have the arms like the Abbey Road cover thing, like Nevada City in the background, and the church at the top of the street and all of that. It's the same exact situation. We set it all up and basically waited for that 3 or 4 or 5 minutes, and then had them walk back and forth doing the Beatles thing, all 4 people with their hands in the same positions and their legs in the same positions to take it. So if you're on Instagram, if you look at Circle's website, or Circle's Instagram or mine, you can kind of see that same concept. Same thing going on here. This is, we're not going to this place on our trip. We're going to this place with our students on our trip. So yeah, even as a high school student, this is the restaurant at the lodge. Same deal though, shooting it right at dusk. So the lights, interior lights balance with the exterior lights. So we got, one of the things that I've always been super intrigued with in Costa Rica is they've got these sky bridge things. You've maybe seen photos of these before, but it gives you this ability to be up in the trees. And again, instead of looking up at the monkeys or looking up at the birds or whatever it is that you want to photograph, you're like at eye level. So all of a sudden you are a bird, you are a monkey, that kind of thing. And obviously this is one of the high school kids on one of our trips. And then the photo on the right is our kid, or our older one. So what would he be? That might've been his second trip. I don't remember. exactly. But just giving a sense of, kind of, what it's like, and that we always take our kids and things like that. I don't take them on the photo trips; they'd be bored stiff. But one of the other fun things that people like to do besides photography is the whole zip lining thing. And this is in Monteverde, this particular zip line. We're not doing that as part of the photo tour, but if you ever go on your own, or if you stay longer or whatever, it's a pretty cool experience, because some of these, like one of them is almost a mile long. It's basically between two ridges, and you're like, sometimes you're going through clouds, sometimes it's raining, sometimes it's sunny, whatever, but you're going like, I don't know, like 50 miles an hour, like through a cloud. It's almost like flying. It's pretty cool. All right, we can talk a little more about actual wildlife here. So one of the things with shooting in Costa Rica is often, because we stay at these lodges, and I would encourage you, whether you ever go on your own or you go with a group, you want to try to go and actually stay at lodges as opposed to like staying at a regular hotel. And one of the things that I've done is I've partnered with this company, Photo Verde Tours in Costa Rica, and the owner is like one of my best friends. We've known them since the days of working at outdoor schools together. But one of the things with these lodges is that they are away from like town or cities or whatever. And I think that's one of the keys if you're going to go and photograph there. You want to get away from town. A lot of these lodges have either their own preserve or they're like the property next to some kind of ecological preserve. The reality meaning there's a lot of wildlife stuff happening right at the lodge. So the howler monkeys, the one on the left, I didn't think about this until now. I should have actually like downloaded and put the call into the PowerPoint presentation or the keynote, but you may be lucky enough to have one of these jump onto your roof at sunrise and start howling. And it sounds like there's like a dragon on the roof of your because there are most of the buildings, not all of them, are like a metal roof. That's the most common roof material. So they can be super loud. I mean, you can hear them literally from like a mile away through the rainforest. And so this is literally, the shot on the left was literally like standing on the balcony of the lodge that we were staying at for one of these. Again, talking about camera settings and things like that, I believe that's like maybe like 400 millimeters on a full frame camera. So, you don't need some huge lens that, costs a car and, you can't carry or anything like that. 100 to 400 lens is usually enough for most of the stuff. So one on the right is the sloth. That was actually one of those, it wasn't at the grocery store, but we stopped at a restaurant as we were going from one place to another. And I think that one, if I remember right, was high school kids. And they were all in there eating. And I was like, I'm going to stay out here. You guys save me some food or order me something. I'm going to stay out here and shoot. Because this sloth was, sloths are tough because they move super slow, but they don't necessarily come to where you want. So it's way more of a, like, when you find them, you photograph them. And we usually find them every trip, but sometimes they're way up in a cecropia tree and, they're not that great of a photo. They're just backlit. But when you find one where it's low enough that you can shoot and have a nice dark background, those are the money ones. I think there's another sloth in here, and that's the one from the grocery store. Literally like concrete, like there was like a staircase and it was on the tree next to us with like a 70 to 200. So as far as shooting, one of the values of Costa Rica, and once you kind of get connected into going to lodges and things like that, is that some of these Paolo Valerio, the guy on the left here, is the owner of Photo Verde Tours that we've kind of partnered with. And I took him, he came up to Alaska after one of my Eagle workshops, and it was pretty funny to take the Tico, or that's the slang for a Costa Rican. They like it. It's a kind of a bragging thing, like a Kiwi or something from someone from New Zealand. So to take the Tico and the Gringo up to Alaska and into the Yukon in the winter and get snowed in and stuck in a blizzard in a hotel and hang out and watch hockey with a bunch of Canadians. It was pretty entertaining just to have that experience versus this. It's so different. But, with this, he basically worked with this lodge to convince them, hey, you need to build like a side deck with a roof so people can shoot even when it's raining. And then you can't see my mouse, but you can look in there and there's kind of this cross-like thing. And so what they do is they put bananas up on this feeder, and they put like a different perch up there. every day, or you can ask them, hey, can we change the perch to this? And you can find some cool thing. And then all of a sudden you have birds coming in that are habituated at, close distance with a background that's far away in nice, soft, overcast light, which is pretty much, you'll see in a second, kind of the perfect setup for, wildlife photography. Some of the things you'd see in Costa Rica, I've always loved the one on the left. That was actually a trip that I did where it was grandparents with their high school aged kids photography tour for, it was at the time called Elder Hostels or Elder Hostel, I think. They've changed the name. I don't remember what it is now, but, and that was like, yeah, we're photographing this frog and that like hopped up on top of this guy's camera. The poison dart frog, the red-eyed tree frog. And then Paolo on the right. A lot of the guides down there or photographers often are using like a 300 millimeter, like this is a 300-2.8. Both of these were shot at this place, probably the same day, maybe. I don't remember that. And actually in this, you can kind of see like the ability, this is another guide I was working with. You can see kind of looking over people's shoulders and like helping with the settings and the exposure and things like that. So, but yeah, we've got the yellow-throated toucan on the right and the parakeet. I don't remember which one it is. There's a bunch of them on the left, but you can see going from where all the cameras are pointed to, the finished product, how that, distance between, and this applies to everything. I was teaching some like studio stuff today to some people, and, the farther back you can make that background, the more it can blur. You blur it out with that depth of field. The best thing in the world, and I know some people are still carrying like big 600 millimeter, $12,000 f4 lenses that are huge and weigh a ton. And it's not always just to get close, because you can get that range now with much smaller and cheaper stuff, but it does give you that ability to have a shallower depth of field to blur stuff out, which is nice. And you kind of see the difference between the left and the right. The one on the right, I actually like better because it does have a little bit of that shape of the palm frond in there, but it's not as clean of a background. So some people would argue maybe that the one on the left actually has a cleaner, nicer background. But yeah, so when doing a photo workshop, we're working to help like set up and create these situations, and then we're not chasing the birds, we're not like trying to force them to do anything, but if they come to the feeder or they come to the perch or something like that, then you're kind of set up and where they're going to go. And I think I was talking to someone about photographing bald eagles today, and we were talking about, this is somebody who's learning to photograph birds, and and we were talking about Llano Seco that I went last week, and we were talking about how it had been kind of slow shooting. There wasn't a lot of action, and I was like, yeah, from a learning standpoint, and I'm trying to learn this new camera, it's not ideal when you only get one chance at the situation. I have 2 immature bald eagles tearing apart a duck, and I was like 10 seconds too late at getting the camera up, and that was like the coolest thing that happened all day, and it just kind of killed me. And I thought, yeah, the difference is I was there for like 3 hours, and that was the most exciting thing that happened. And when you go to a place where eagles are feeding on salmon and there's a bunch of them, you can set up and action keeps happening at the same place, and thus you can improve your photos and your skill and things like that. And it's the same thing with working with birds like this, where they're coming to like a known perch. And I would say most bird photos of this caliber are shot in some kind of a on a perch or something like that. They're not captive, but because I have multiple chances to shoot multiple frames as opposed to that one bird quick flying across and that's it. Those are rare to succeed at.
Josh, there was a question about the camera setups back on that, the cabana there, about people are wondering about whether there were flash units on top of those cameras. Or...
so people are using flashes up on top. Those things on the front of them are called better beamers. And what they're doing, and I've also seen this is kind of going away now. It used to be, especially the days of film, it was almost like to get a good photo in a situation like this, you almost had to use a flash not to light the bird up, but to just add a little bit of fill light, which is the same thing. You can't see it, but I borrowed this little ring light that's up above my laptop right now. And if I turn it off, right, this is actually a great example of it. It still looks okay, but that little bit of extra kiss of light makes it look a lot nicer, and you get it opens up the shadows. The difference now, like I don't even carry a flash for the most part anymore, except for a few situations, because now you can just open up the shadow slider, right, in Lightroom or something similar. Whereas back in the day, you had so little dynamic range, early digital film. Like I just went through my film archive last year and like digitized a bunch, and it's just like horrifying to like, that's all the shadow detail I have, to look back on what we were doing, a decade or 15 years ago or 20 years ago. But that's what's going on. So they're not, and you'll notice like a lot of these, some of them at least, the flashes are up higher, the second camera from the left. And the idea of that is to also have the angle of the light coming in not straight off the lens, so you're not getting any kind of red eye issues, things like that. And the birds don't mind it because you're not giving them like a full blast. In a sense, you're giving them, depending on the ambient light, you can set it manually or in TTL, but you're probably giving them, the equivalent of 3 stops under what a normal like flash lit photo would be. So it's just a little hint of light, kind of like my demo. Right. Does that sort of answer what they're asking?
I think so. Yeah.
Okay. Yeah. In this picture, you can see what that better beamer looks like from the front. And it just helps to focus the flash beam a little bit more because it's not that you need the power, but it's that you want the flash to be able to recycle quickly. And those first Eagle trips that I did years ago to Alaska, I was shooting with a manual focus 500 millimeter. And like you had to for almost anything, if there was any light behind the bird, you had to use a flash, and then you could only shoot like 2 pictures a second because the flash has to recycle. And I definitely melted a flash by trying to hotwire it into a homemade battery and doing all those things that people were doing at the time. And you can only fire that thing so many times before it gets too hot and it will actually melt the thing, which I have done. So I also destroyed a camera by trying to photograph an eclipse at one point too. Not taking the picture, but by leaving it pointing and talking to someone and turning around and going, oh no. And I melted the mirror assembly. So, and I've always kicked myself for not taking a picture of it because it was pretty cool. And I sent it back and they repaired it for free. And I told them what I did, but thank you, Nikon. So anyways, I'm just checking my time. The one on the left, another sloth photo. Again, one of the keys is getting that eye contact, with your subject. Yes, the sloth's eyes are purposely hard to see. I mean, that's their camouflage, right? They even have the little black thing under the eyes. Like the saying goes, they move super slowly, moving like a sloth, right? They only come to the ground once a week to poop, bury it, and then go back up into the tree. Otherwise, they never come to the ground. They fully stay in the trees. But their whole idea is that they move slow, and that is their protection. That they blend in. Their hair, and I think they call it hair, not fur, ends up growing algae in it. And basically it's like this, I mean, from what I've been told, I've never been like super close to one, like, 5 feet. I've heard that they smell horrible because, they want to not be noticed. Their camouflage or their protection from predators is completely hiding, not fighting back, not running away. So, and then the red-legged honeycreeper on the right. And that's another example of one of those, like, it's coming, I'm like set up and like just photographing the birds that are coming in to feed and, interact with, the other birds, and you're just kind of set in one place. So a lot of times what we'll do is set up, like the shot you saw, we'll set up in that spot. It's very civil compared to some of the other things I do where I'm like carrying my camera and like skiing up onto, the Yosemite Rim in the winter for a week or whatever. These are very civil. You're like, I'll have a cup of coffee while I'm shooting. You're like right there at the lodge. You can like sit in a chair and like push the button with your, cable release if you really set it up, so it's kind of fun in that, and it allows you to really improve. Just checking where I'm at on time. So one of the other cool things, this is a relatively new thing that we've been starting to photograph in Costa Rica more, is bats. We kind of took some of the principles that we were, developing and learning with regards to photographing hummingbirds, and started kind of building the same concept towards bats. So it's flash lit, right? Because it's dark. And basically, I don't have an example photo to show you the setup, which I do have for the hummingbirds. But with this, we're basically setting it up And with doing these trips with Photo Verde, we've invested in equipment that basically lives down there. And so, which sort of started from when Jen and I, my wife and I, used to work for Woodleaf Outdoor School. We would have the winters free. So we would go to Costa Rica and Panama for 6 weeks, 2 months, or whatever for every winter. And we were spending a bunch of that time in Panama, actually, probably more so. But we had become friends with Paolo and his wife and this company. And so we were all kind of building this together. And I started realizing, I'm like, I'm coming down here every year and I'm bringing light stands, flashes, all this stuff. And I started realizing I just need to leave this stuff here. So I left some light stands, some clamps and things. And then that kind of built into, they started taking those on other trips, kind of grew into, hey, we should have like a full setup that, you know, clients can plug into and use this equipment. And you don't have to own a bunch of flashes. With this, it's an infrared trigger. And so the way that it works is we've got 2 or 4, or sometimes if you want a background, maybe 5 or 6 flashes, you know, depending on how you want to light it, in little soft boxes. They're battery powered flashes. They're not like big plug in the wall ones. And then with this, there's an infrared trigger. And when the bat flies up to the flower to get, you know, food, you know, nectar or whatever, when the bat flies up, it triggers the flashes with this little infrared beam. And then with that one though, because it's dark, everyone can shoot at the same time. It's pretty cool because there's no other light. Everybody's lights are totally off. So you shine a light, you pre-focus, get it all set. Everybody turns off their lights, flashes are ready to go. And you just set your shutter speed at like 30 seconds and you push the button, everybody pushes the button, and then you just wait for 30 seconds. And if the bat flies in, bam, it exposes them. And if it doesn't, you just push the button again and you just keep doing that. And there's a bunch of bats coming in and feeding. And so, you know, you get 1 bat, sometimes you get 2, right? And you get bats coming in. And so they're 100% flash lit. And because the flash, and maybe this is for some people going farther than we need to. And for some of us, we're like, oh yeah, that totally makes sense. But because you know, I'm shooting at a 30th of a second, or sorry, 30 seconds, I should say. You know, so theoretically it should blur, right? They're moving, they're flapping their wings. But the flash is what's actually freezing the action, not the shutter speed. And the flash, I've heard all sorts of different numbers, and it's probably very dependent on the particular flash model. But my understanding is flashes put out the same amount of power no matter what. It's more a matter of how long do they put that power out for. Douglas probably could tell me more on that. I think
That's right. And if you turn the flash power up and down, it goes faster and slower. So a full power flash is about a 3,000th or 5,000th of a second.
Okay.
And a lower power flash is about 20 to 25,000th of a second.
See, that's perfect. I figured you would know more than I would on that. But the underlying principle is the flash is so much faster than a shutter speed that you would need that it does the same thing. But you're able to keep the thing going for a long period of time. Thus, you know, I have photos where like 5 or 6 bats flew in and they're in front of each other and behind each other, or multiples at a time, you know, because it'll fire every time one goes near it. So, you know, we kind of work together to like build that setup, and then everybody comes out after dinner and we spend like, I bet some of us spent like 4 hours. We were having a ball. The first time I ever did it, I was like, this is amazing. Like I'd never even thought that we could do this. And yeah, it's super cool.
Even at full power, the full flash power, they're close to 1,000th of a second, some of them.
Is that way more like by the particular model of flash, or is that?
No, they're all that way.
Okay.
If you go down to like 256 power or something like
however low it goes.
Flash duration gets up to like 13,000ths of a second or something like that.
Well, and in that situation with those bats, you know, like the flashes aren't super far away. You can raise your ISO a bit. You know, I finally got rid of my big plug in the wall flashes because I'm like, well, I can shoot at 400 or 800 ISO and really not have to worry about it. Where it used to be, you know, I was trying to keep it at 100 or 200 and I needed bigger, more powerful lights. But now, like, you know, I don't know the last time I actually used the flash at full power, you know, and for the most part, except for these kinds of things, I'm really not using one anymore. I don't have one in my bag. I don't travel with one, except I still own like 4 old Nikon ones, but I don't use them much. One of the other cool things in Costa Rica is boat access. So we talked about like the access walking on those like sky bridges. We talked about the access of like being on, you know, different lodges where they've got setups that we've kind of, you know, worked with them to like be keeping those setups working. The boat tours are super fun. And I like the picture on the right more in terms of, it always makes me think of when I was a kid and I went to Disneyland and I went on that jungle tour ride that some of you guys have probably done, you know, where they like shoot the, whatever it is, like a hippopotamus or something, the guy in the front of the boat, and scared us as little kids and stuff. But it kind of makes me think of that, of like going through these canals or these rivers, like, you know, things are overgrown and stuff. We don't have hippos or whatever that was to shoot, you know, it's a little bit more controlled, a little more safe. But, you know, this gives you access to a lot of stuff on the shore, especially crocodiles, American crocodile at one of the spots. In fact, I realized I didn't put it in. I have shot, there's a bridge that we usually stop at where you can look down and the crocodiles, there's like 100 of them all underneath this road bridge. And it's kind of sad in that the reason they're there is because the locals come and like dump their trash off the bridge. And like, I've seen people go out there with like chickens and throw chickens off the thing. And then all the crocodiles are, you know, fighting over and stuff. But from a photographic standpoint, it's pretty dang cool because you get like drone view straight down on crocodiles. You know, versus, you know, this view, these are like boat type shots. But, you know, you're getting birds up close, you know, because once you're in a boat, if you're quiet and they let the boat drift, you can get really close. You know, stuff where you're like 200 millimeters is like, you know, I mean, stuff like this crocodile, like they'll be like 10 feet from the boat or less sometimes. And you're like, well, they won't climb in, right? And they're like, no, they won't climb in. Don't worry. Just don't get out. You'll be fine. So yeah, I think I always like the boat tours, usually like with the students, high school students, we usually do, it's cheaper, right? We do like a midday boat tour because they're not trying to get the best light for photos and things like that. And they're stoked. They're like, oh, I saw scarlet macaws and crocodiles were, you know, doing whatever they were doing. And, you know, they caught something and they were eating it or, you know, that kind of thing. But on a photo thing, we usually try to do like a morning and a sunset, you know, more like for the light. So if you were to go wanting to do photos, whether you're going on your own or going with a group, you know, I think you want to like try to time it better than what we do with our high school students, or like a general tour. And I think that's a good point. You know, I struggle with this with my own family in that you have to make a choice when you go on a trip. Is this a, you know, a photo trip, you know, centered on photography, or is this a family trip that I might get to shoot a few photos on? And I think that vastly changes what you bring, because, you know, I don't know about the rest of you all, but I probably bring too much crap a lot of times, too many things, you know, and we're always like, well, what if there's this, what if I come across that? And you're like, well, I better bring this and I better bring that. So, you know, I think you have to really consciously decide, are you going to Costa Rica to make the best photos you can, or are you going to Costa Rica to just enjoy the experience and take a few shots along the way? So turtles as well. I didn't mention turtles. Turtles are a hard one in that it's very hit and miss. Sometimes, I don't think we're doing this in our photo workshop, but with the high school kids, we've traditionally done a volunteer project where we walk the beach at night to basically, as a group, to keep poachers from trying to steal the turtle eggs. So when we find a turtle laying eggs, like a leatherback, you know, a green sea turtle or whatever laying eggs, we basically stay back, but we watch them lay the eggs. And when they leave, we dig them up, actually, and they take them to the vivero, I guess it's probably, and basically a fenced off area of the beach where it has like a 24-hour guard. And then they rebury the eggs. And then when the eggs hatch, they weigh and measure the turtles, and then they take them out to the beach and they let them go. And they keep the, you know, birds and things like that from getting them, at least till they get to the water. They get a much higher success rate, you know, because I don't remember the exact number, but it's like, I don't know, maybe 1% of the baby turtles born actually return back to their beach. And some of them are coming back years and years later, you know, to the exact same beach. And since poaching is a big thing, you know, those eggs are worth a lot of money. You know, a lot of different groups will come out and do that, walk the beach at night. And, you know, when there's people there, they won't come and try to steal the eggs. And so, you know, it's harder to be, you know, with photography, it's not a guarantee that you're going to find sea turtles unless you're doing something like that. You know, or you just get lucky. You're at the beach and you're like, oh, look, there's a nest coming out, which has happened while we've been there. And that it was pretty cool to watch the little turtles. They're cute. Other stuff we find on on those boat tours. I've totally forgotten until I put this together that I ever photographed this guy. So this is like, God, I don't know, a D100 probably, D200, like very early digital camera. Now I'm like, man, I wish I'd shot that with something with more resolution. But it does prove the point that even at whatever that was, 8 or 10 megapixels or something like that, like it's still pretty cool. And so I think there's a good lesson in that. As I just bought a camera that's like 45 megapixels and is, really cool and all that stuff. Like, do we really, I clearly justified it, but do we really need all of that when it's more about a matter of being in the right place at the right time and spending a lot of time there? So with this guy, he was just like swimming down the river and we just shut off the motor and just like drifted down the river with him. And he was playing and climbing up on things. And, I think I might have even been a manual focus lens back then too. The howlers again. So, with these, it's all about finding a place like I've talked about where you can get like a view at eye level through the trees. And then, whether you get the photo or not, I think that has slowly changed for me as I've become less and less focused on selling of photos to publishers and things, and more focused on leading of trips. Like, it's easier. I don't feel like I have the pressure as much as I used to of like, I've got to get the photos because that's like my income. And now it's way more like, we just get to have a great experience. And if we get a photo, that's just icing on the cake, because it's pretty cool to watch these guys, jumping between trees and interacting and like, wrestling and like pushing each other off and climbing on each other's backs and playing and, and the babies and things like that. It's a really cool experience to see that. And then when you hear them, yeah, they're like so loud. Frogs. We got obviously the most famous, the red-eyed tree frog. I've always used this shot on the left as a good teaching image in terms of, you can kind of see the whole story of what's going on. And so, you've got the red-eyed tree frog on the back of his camera. This is Jody, I should say. He's one of the guides that we work with down there sometimes. And it's cool to watch him because since I've known him, he's gone from, just kind of getting into photography to now starting to lead trips to like Africa and Ecuador and things like that. He's really gotten into photography, and that's like primarily what he's doing now. So, so with this, yeah, we've got why can't I not think of the plant? Anyways, I'll think of it in a second. But we put the frog on there, and then it just is like climbing around and doing its thing, and then we're able to like be at distance in a shady place in low light, or not in low light, but without shadows. And then we're just, working with a macro lens or a zoom lens and kind of just following it around in there. And really trying to, with the frogs, it used to be traditionally almost all the frog photos were done with a flash. And, you don't want to do too much of that because it's, long term, if you're just blasting them with a flash for a whole million photos, that's really probably not good for them. So we're really trying to move away from, using a flash, and as much as possible doing it with ambient light, or now we're starting to use more of like LED panel lights that, you can, raise the ISO up, and, it's not, as intrusive to them as what used to be the case. When I first started going, people would be like chasing them through the brush with like big flashes on the front of their camera and stuff like that. And, that's not necessarily good long-term, I think, for them. The one on the right is the glass frog. So with that, we basically just put a flash behind it, and a little bit of light in front, but mainly just to pass the light through, because they basically are clear, which is super cool. One on the left is one of my favorite frog photos, just in terms of it's something different, because we see a lot of the same red-eyed tree frog photos. They're cool. Red-eyed tree frogs are, it's like the Costa Rican frog, that you see in the airport and on, advertisements and stuff like that, but a little bit different, way more like looking for like shapes and things. And I always liked, we did get a little bit of light behind him to try to get, so we could see the shadow of his feet. So we get a little bit more of that story. Yeah.
Good question. If this wasn't lit by flash, would the eyes of the frog would they be as small, the
dilated?
Yeah, would they be dilated as much?
I think this one is, I don't remember if this is flash or LED panel lights, because I can tell from looking at it, there's 2 catch lights in the eye. So I know there was 2 light sources. So yeah, in terms of that, I don't believe so. I mean, their eyes are pretty, much like that all the time. I'm pretty sure, if I'm remembering the situation, I'm pretty sure that this was, we were starting to experiment with those LED panel lights. That way we weren't like blasting them, and it was just like a constant, lower ambient light, just enough to be able to, now you're like, oh, we can shoot it at 1600 ISO and not really have to worry about it, as opposed to back in the day when you're like, I got to shoot it at 200, and something else with macro is that you need a lot more depth of field. The more macro your subject, the less you get, at f8 or f11 or f16, the less depth of field you get. So the one on the right, I believe, is flash, and that's because that's a much older image. On a wild ginger, I think, the green and black frog. There's all sorts of other crazy things that you find there. Things like this guy, one of the high school kids. Hummingbirds, I think, are the last piece of this, and then we can just do questions and stuff. So hummingbirds, there's a big draw to photographing hummingbirds, not just, I think, in Costa Rica, but Costa Rica has become one of the places where people really work on that. And I think, figuring out the best way to do it has taken, different paths. Some people, I think, have gone, in different directions and done different things. But, with this, it's like really consciously trying to build a scene. And so this was Paolo's setup when I was down there. This is actually at the lodge that David and I will be at. And this was the setup that he built. And he was kind of like, hey, check this out. Like, look at this way that we've been doing this. This is like kind of, we think like the next step in doing hummingbirds. In fact, that's Paolo. So yeah, it's done with a flash, several flashes. You'll see it in a second. And I like to shoot them without flash as well. It's substantially more difficult in that, you have to have a clean background. You have to have, more light, all these things. And the hummingbirds, they don't mind the flash one bit. So basically the way that this is done is, there's a place where, the lodge just has feeders up all the time. And so what we do is we just go put a plant in that area and then, remove the hummingbird feeder, and then they come to the plant. So it's a relatively easy thing. I think that built from, it used to be, feeders had, multiple holes, and people started going, oh, I'll tape over all the holes but one, so I know which hole they're going to go to. And then it started being like, well, I don't want a picture of the bird at a feeder. I want a picture of the bird feeding from a plant. And so, that's like slowly evolved as we've been doing these things. So this is the actual setup that Paolo had, we've been doing. So what we did in this situation, and the way that we do these with like a photo workshop, is that we have all this equipment there, and so basically we like work with the clients to like set it up and build it, and then everybody can kind of take turns. We've got 2 or 3 setups depending on the size of the group, and basically you just like plug your camera into the hot shoe, and then it controls all the flashes. They're all set manually, so it's just triggering them. And so what we've got is the background. My mouse, I forgot. The background, the high-tech light stand with a kayak paddle and some gaffer's tape. It's a canvas that we printed an out of focus, really nice, blurred background. So you're getting, kind of like, it's starting to be like shooting in a studio. And I kind of go back and forth on this one a little bit of like, at what point is this no longer nature photography and is it studio photography? Which is we could have that discussion. I've always kind of been interested in that, because it's like you're striving for perfection, but at the same time, is it still natural or not? I would say 99% of all the good hummingbird photos you see have some version of this going on. So we got the background, we've got the plant, the hummingbird feeders were hanging from the roof earlier, and then we've got 2 flashes with soft boxes kind of up at 45 degrees, kind of typical studio lighting type thing. We've got one more at eye level, which is of the hummingbird. And then we've got one that's lower shooting up. So you're getting that iridescent. And the trick with hummingbirds is they have all these iridescent colors, which you almost never get when you're photographing them just like against a typical background, because they're not lit well. And that's kind of how this evolution of this type of thing, because if you look at this guy, you've got the iridescent underbelly, the wings are frozen, and you can adjust shutter speeds and, drag your flash, with a rear curtain sync and all these different things to add blur to the wings or not. To me, it's like getting him with his little tongue out. That's pretty cool. I like that. So that's kind of the setup of how we've been doing some of these in varying degrees of this, but at the same time, as much as I'm like, well, are we creating something that's more of a studio or not? The birds nobody's messing with the birds in that, they're still come and go as they please. They're not captive. They're not, nobody's catching them or anything like that. And yeah, we'll do this for an hour or something and then put the hummingbird feeders up and leave them alone. And it only happens on a rare occasion. So I don't think it's a huge impact on them. They don't seem to mind, that's for sure. They're quite happy to come for the food. So in wrapping up, and then I can just do questions and talk, and I got my stuff if you guys want to talk about what I bring in these days on, different trips. Kind of wrapping up, I think one of the big things about Costa Rica is just the amount of shooting you get to do in a period of time. If you know where to go, and especially if you know where to go and you go with people that can help, set you up or point you in the right direction, whether you go on your own and you just, figure out where that lodge is and then you go stay for a few days, or you go on like a trip like David and I are doing where it would be, David and myself plus Paolo as the naturalist guide. So, Paolo's in this photo. This is Jen, my wife. This is a biological research station years ago. And we went and just hung out and shot photos for like a week. And it was pretty amazing because when you have someone who's, by training a biologist who has done all this rainforest research, he knows where to look to find things in a way that none of us mere mortals know. It takes a lifetime to know, oh, you want to photograph a quetzal? Well, here's where we need to go. Here's what we need to look for. You're looking for this particular type of, fruit, this avocado. You're trying to find all these particular things to find that quetzal. Whereas, just walking down the trail with the camera and shooting what you randomly find, becomes way less productive than going with a guide that, knows where to find a particular thing you're looking for. So yeah, the quetzal, like I said, I'd have a picture of the quetzal. It's the kind of the, I don't know, the icing on the cake if you can get a quetzal. It's this is honestly not that great of a quetzal photo. There are quetzals that have tails that are substantially longer, which is always cool. This guy was going in and out of the nest, and it was amazing because like the tail, like they can't even fit their whole tail in the nest. It's because it nests in a tree, so it's going in and it like pokes its head out, but the tail is still sticking out, like it's curved through the nest and back out the nest hole. So yeah, they're super cool to see. I have photographed them some. I'm really excited to hopefully get to photograph them with some newer, better equipment, instead of, shooting at 400 ISO and that's it. Now I'm like, I can shoot it at 3200 and, not carry as big a lens. So, so kind of wrapping up, and let me just talk questions and things like that. Cause yeah, that puts us at about 45 minutes, something like that. If you want to find out more about some of the trips that I'm doing personally, or, I'm doing the one with David, I'm doing Lake Tahoe. What is that? The Saturday after this, I think, the 5th. We've got 2 spots left. It's all outside. Everybody has to be vaccinated to go on the trips at this point, because I think liability wise, we can't not do that. But it's all outside. Everybody drives themselves. So it's a sunrise to sunset thing. And we start at Emerald Bay and work our way around the lake throughout the day. And then I've got the Costa Rica thing. David, we still got several spots left. And then I have a boat chartered in Alaska for bears in July on the Katmai coast. So if you want to photograph bears, it's the best place in the world to do it. And with a really well-known naturalist that's going to be leading the trip with us. And then I do those eagle trips in Alaska in November. So hopefully the week before Thanksgiving this year is the plan. So on the Chilkat River. So I'll stop sharing the thing here and answer questions. There's a lot of me talking.
I don't think that there's anything in the chat, so it looks like Anne wants to ask something.
Yeah, Josh, what's the temperature going to be like in July? And what's the weather?
In Costa Rica?
Yeah.
Hot. It's always the same. It's hot and it rains.
Okay,
I always make that joke because there's a rainy season and a dry season. And technically it's the rainy season, but really it just rains like every day. Like, it's just like par for the course. So I don't really actually make much of a distinction between the seasons in Costa Rica, because you can still shoot in the rain. We got different places with roofs and things like that. And yeah, I personally am not actually a fan of like tropical climate. It's like, yeah, it's great for like your skin because your skin's not dry and cracking, but it's so hot and humid. I'm far more like, if I could convince Jen, I would move to Alaska. Even the winter, I'm like, that sounds awesome. I'm playing in the snow all winter. But I mean, I love going to Costa Rica, not so much the climate, but because like the photography is just like, it's like a National Geographic movie right outside your door.
Okay, anybody else have another question or comment for Josh?
Well,
It
just a
looks like there's
comment for Josh. That was really wonderful. Thank you, Josh. And
thanks.
you're bringing back wonderful travel memories of when we got to go to Costa Rica. And our guide taught us how to shoot the hummingbirds with your phone using the high-speed video. So as they're beating their wings, and when you play it back, they're like dancers in slow motion.
Okay.
I don't know
Basically,
if you've
it's like
tried that, and
taking-
maybe you know that trick, but it was just beautiful.
It's basically like you're doing like a high frame rate, like 120 frames a
Yeah,
second or
on
something,
the video.
and then
play-
slowing it down.
Yeah. And to watch a group of them do that, which is a vision of hummingbirds you never actually get to see.
Yeah, because you can never see that with your
Yeah.
naked eye. Yeah, hummingbirds are super cool. Like, I mean, I've learned all these random things, like they're the only bird that can truly hover and fly. What is it? I think they can fly upside down.
Oh.
And like like their heartbeat is, I don't remember the number. It's crazy. Their heartbeat is super fast. I should have planned on this. I have this student in this class I'm doing who's like an amazing encyclopedia of bird knowledge. And we were talking about hummingbirds. And he's like, did you know that, their heartbeats, whatever it was like 1,000 times a minute or something like that? I mean, we could Google search and find out, but it was just kind of crazy. It's like all these things about how fast they beat their wings and their metabolism that, they can only go for a very short period of time without eating because their metabolism is so high. At night, they basically sort of go into almost like a hibernation because they're not able to feed, and they would otherwise, starve to death in one night.
So how
Josh,
I'll ask about, go ahead.
sorry.
Kathy.
There's just two questions here. One is, have you had much trouble with camera gear and humidity?
Yeah.
It's a good question. I have not, and I would say there's a couple of factors with that. One, obviously, at this point, earlier on in my career, I had a lot of cameras break, and I don't know if that was just cheaper cameras or just bad luck. I don't know. But I mean, these days, I'm using, professional level stuff, which is sealed pretty well. But there are some tricks. Like I've never really had an issue with, moisture getting in and stuff. But one of the keys is that you don't want to bring your camera from warm, humid outside into cold, air-conditioned room and back and forth. Like that's not a good thing because it'll condense, right? Water will condense around it. So what the trick is, what you do is you actually, if you're in a room that has air conditioning, and on these trips, depending on the lodge, like some of them do and some of them don't. There's one lodge that we sometimes use that doesn't, because it's just like so far out and remote that it's like they just can't. I think they're either completely solar, or they may have like some kind of power wheel in a creek, but they're pretty independent. But the trick with that, and the same thing with like being in Alaska or something like that in the winter, the trick is keep your stuff in the bathroom and don't let the air conditioning run in the bathroom. Basically keep your stuff at as close to ambient temperature. Or when I'm photographing like Yellowstone in the winter, and you're driving with the windows open sometimes, so you can shoot out them. But basically, you keep the car as cold as you can deal with. That way, your camera is not going from the warm car to the outside and then suddenly, back in and condensing, and that's a big thing with keeping the camera gear, functioning. If you have problems with that, you can just stuff your whole bag in a garbage bag, pour some rice in there or something. In general, my main plan is that I just don't open the camera bag going in or going back into a room for a while, so it can slowly change temperature in the bag because it's insulated. Same thing in the winter. You know, and then, yeah, professional stuff, like I don't have the picture in here, but you know, I have a picture of this guy. He rented in Alaska on one of the Eagle trips. He rented the 600 f4, so it's like a $12,000 lens, and it rained / sleeted / dropped below freezing, and so the whole thing is like covered in ice because he didn't cover it or anything. And he's got the ice scraper from the car, and he's like, and we're all like, "Are you serious? Like that's a $12,000 lens that you're ice scraping. Like you should have covered that thing." And it was fine. He had no problem with it. He sent it back when he was done, and because it was a rental, and it worked out fine. So,
Jeez.
but I'm
Another
certainly not
question.
one. I don't have a lens like that, and I'm not gonna do that if I ever get one. So
Another question for you, Josh. If you want to be photographing wild birds, isn't July a little
Yes.
late? It seems like they might have migrated by then.
So yeah, it depends on what you want to photograph. Correct. If you
And
want to
they're working-
photograph certain migratory birds that are coming down from North America, you know, Alaska or you know the Arctic or something like that, any of those types of things, yeah, it's the wrong season to do it. You know, so we're focusing more on like the resident tropical birds. You know, so I think it's the difference between, I always joke with people, there's birders and there's photographers. You know, birders are like, oh, yep, okay, check that off. I saw it from a half a mile away and that counts. Or I only heard it, but that counts on my bird list, you know, my life list or whatever. Whereas photographers are like, that doesn't cut it at all. It's like, I don't want to see it from a long ways away. It's cool to see it, but it doesn't count unless I can get close enough and it can be on a nice perch with a nice background. And I have time to like compose and make some different compositions. And, you know, you want an hour with that bird if you could get it right, which rarely happens. But that's the difference, I think, with the birder versus the photographer. You know, unless you're looking for those specific migratory species, it makes a lot less of a difference. Whereas we're going for like the toucans, the, you know, if we're really lucky, a quetzal, you know, the red-legged honey creepers, scarlet macaws, things like that. They're there all the time. So.
A couple of pieces of information for you. Hummingbirds BPM is 1,260, and their wings beat 70 times a second, according to John Sievert.
So is that BPM, is that wing
Beats
beat
per
or that
minute.
heart rate?
I'm assuming that's a heart rate. John?
Beats per
Sievert?
minute, I'm assuming?
I'm sorry, beats per second. Beats per minute.
Okay,
Yeah,
beats
so-
per minute.
Yeah. Beats
Either
per minute.
way,
Yeah, so
that's,
60.
you know, what's the typical like,
Incredible.
human resting heart rate, or, you know, or running, let's say you're running, because they are flying, it's active, right? It's like pretty substantial. So yeah, they're that's
Right.
why their metabolism is just like crazy fast.
Yeah, that's crazy. That's cool.
Yeah, they're really neat to see. And there's some of them, you know, that have co-evolved with different particular plants that like, that's the only plant that their beak will actually fit inside of that plant, and it's just the right length. And that's so basically they have this, like, I don't know if it technically counts as a symbiotic relationship. I don't think that's the right term for it, but they're the only thing that can pollinate that plant, and that plant is the only thing that can feed them, which is pretty cool.
So there's a question here. What is your travel setup, and do you check your gear?
I don't check my stuff. Don't check your stuff. Because, you know, I mean, I have had to gate check things in the past, but yeah, I really, really would try to avoid that, because you don't know who's going to drop that thing and, you know, pick on it, play with it, open it up, things like that. So my general setup, I actually just got this bag recently. A friend recommended it and I wanted to try it. I got a great used on eBay deal. So it's a Mindshift 30 liter, whatever it's called. First white. But basically my goal is like, I don't want to carry any more than I can put in an overhead bin. So I've always been on this, like, that's the limiting factor with anything that I own, is it has to be able to fit on a plane in the overhead bin, which means, you know, I have like, I just sold my 500 f4, but, you know, I had like a roller suitcase that I could put that lens in, but it was a real hassle to travel with. You know, because you're like trying to get this thing up while not looking like it weighs like, you know, way overweight. So in general, I don't try to check my gear. I try to carry the whole kit on the plane versus checking things. And then, yeah, I'll check other stuff I've usually carried my tripod on, at least on the way there, because, you know, especially when I was traveling, you know, when I do those Eagle trips, like I'm intending on renting probably a 500 or 600 millimeter for the Eagle trip this next year, rather than owning them, because I just don't think I need to own it for what I'm doing anymore. With that, you really can't handhold that lens very long. So I'll carry the tripod on the way home. I'm like, I don't want to have to carry it. If it takes a week to get to my house, I really don't care. So I'll check it, you know, with kind of like less suffering versus inability to work if I don't have it on the way there. And I've never had any trouble with them with tripods. I have heard of people, I heard of one person, they were like, that's a weapon, you can't bring it. I'm like, what? But I've never had any trouble. The other piece that's really good actually, as far as traveling overseas, you know, I have my stuff insured. And so I have like a spreadsheet that has all the serial numbers and, you know, all that stuff. I have heard of stories of people coming back from overseas where for some reason, some customs person, I don't know, they're having a bad day or whatever. They're like, you're importing all this stuff and you can't prove that you already owned it before you left. And they try to basically make them pay like an import tax. And so I've always just traveled with my insurance list, figuring like, look, this is insured. I can show you the date. You can call my insurance company, but all these things were insured well before I went on this trip. And I've never actually had to show it, but something to think about if you're traveling with like a lot of stuff.
All right. Did you want to talk about your Z9?
Do you want me to?
Well, give us a 2-minute soundbite.
Yeah. How are we doing on time?
Good.
So this is my new wildlife setup. It's the, I've had the lens for a while. It's the Nikon 500 millimeter PF. It's a 5.6. So it's a fixed 500 millimeter. It's got the hood, but it weighs the same as a 70 to 200 2.8, but it's a 500 5.6. It focuses super fast, and you know, I mean, it's hand holdable. So that was kind of my thing where I was like, okay, if I give up that extra stop of light, maybe I can't use a teleconverter as much. But with the Z9, you know, it's 45 megapixels, which means I can just flip the switch and switch it to the DX mode, cropped mode, and it becomes 20 megapixels at 720 millimeters, and it's hand holdable. So that was kind of my, like, this last like 6 months of debate, especially once I knew this was coming, because, you know, I'd heard about it probably 6 months ago or more, was like, is it worth the investment in this and get rid of that big lens? Because this, with the Black Rapid strap, I can throw it over my shoulder. Like 3 hours at Llano Seco, I just had it over my shoulder the whole time, and I can pick it up and shoot. I can walk around. I'm not tied to a tripod. You know, it's just vastly more, it's just more fun. That's, I think, probably the root of it. Instead of being tied to this huge lens that's a project to move from one spot to the other, I just go for a walk. And, you know, so the Z9, I tried it with the 1.4 converter. I tried it with the 2 times converter with this lens, and it was tracking birds with even a 2 times converter at, what would that be, f11, like birds in flight, and which has never been possible before with a 2x at that slow. So yeah, I'm pretty sold. I've had it for a week, so you know, I haven't had that much time with it yet. But I shot Cook Sewell. My kid just did a 100, I don't remember what they call the test, a 2.5 hour Cook Sewell test on Sunday. Tony, who does Gold Country Cook Sewell, outside at Forest Charter on the grass, and I shot like 1,100 photos trying to get him in like the exact position. I was testing the camera, just set it on JPEG because I didn't need big files. And out of 1,100 photos, I don't think a single one was out of focus. It just locked on the kid's eye the whole time. He's spinning around and doing these kicks. And every time he'd spin around, it would focus on his head. And when he came back around, it would instantly be on his eyes. And it was just like, all right, I think it changes the whole game for, you know, wildlife and action and stuff like that. So.
All right, so I hope Nikon gives you a little payback for that.
Yeah, I wish. No, they charged me the full amount for this beast.
Oh,
So.
Well, thanks very much. I think we've come to the end, and I really appreciate everything you've said, and that makes me want to go to Costa Rica now. I've been there once, but not like that. So that's very cool. Thanks so much for joining us, Josh. And Rachel, back to you.
Okay. All right. Yes, thank you, Josh.
Thanks.
Yes, would love to go back to Costa Rica. All right, well, let's take a break. Let's do 10 minutes. We'll come back at 7:40 and we're going to go through the best of each of the category images for 2021, show you guys those, and then we'll move on to the critique for tonight. So with that, stand up, get something to drink, and I'll see you guys in 10 minutes.
I'll come back real quick. If people have questions, I can stick around and chat. or
Oh,
whatever, too.
thanks.
So let me just go get my water refilled.
Okay.